have an in-service with your technician, right? If you're able to get a technician in-house to be like, hey, this is what I'm looking for when I repair stuff. This is stuff that I'm looking for that I say, hey, I can't repair this. And getting those, working closely with your repair company is, I think, the biggest step in repair management for the hospital.
Rising above the buzz of ultrasonic cleaners and the clanking of stainless steel are the ideas and voices that are changing an industry. You're listening to the Beyond Clean podcast, the central nexus for the people, processes, and products that are improving our sterile processing world. Each week, we speak with frontline technicians, CEOs, engineers, and entrepreneurs with a common goal: to help you fight dirty, every instrument, every time. Whether you're tuning in for education or inspiration, we're glad you did. Now turn on those washers and turn up the volume. It's time to go beyond clean.
Hey there, clean freaks. You're listening to Beyond Clean. And on this episode, we're going to be talking to Chase Elms about the topic of instrument repair management in sterile processing. We're going to go into some of the primary themes around communication, workflow, accountability, the importance of functional instruments in general in SPD. I know this is one of those topics that seems, hey, obvious. We want our instruments to work, and yet it can be easy to assume things are happening out on the truck or with your repair tech, to assume that somebody's doing something with the data, and maybe to make assumptions that are not correct. And so we're going to talk through some of the implications here with Chase today and try to give you a little bit of vision and encouragement for how to improve your process today if you're having issues around your repair tech, your process, your contract even. We're going to pick up all those themes. So hang here with us. We'll be right back in studio with Chase Elms.
I'm Bobby Parker.
And I'm Hank Balch.
From the studios of Healthcare HQ, you're listening to Beyond Clean, the global voice of sterile processing.
All right, clean freaks, my name's Hank Balch, and we are in studio today with Chase Elms, a member of the Beyond Clean Advisory Group, an active sterile processing clinician out there doing big things in healthcare. Chase, thank you for joining us on the show today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Now, for anybody that doesn't know you, what's a little bit of your background? How'd you get into SPD? Tell us that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so I was a nursing assistant for many years. Wanted to kind of, healthcare was always my passion, and didn't really know what I wanted to do. Was looking at nursing, looking at paramedicine. I ended up getting my bachelor's degree in exercise physiology just because I wanted to get out of college.
I was going to say, just because you wanted to play on the weekends and stuff.
Yep, I just wanted to be out. So it was just kind of, and then I didn't really use it at all. And my dad actually, perfect topic, because my dad did repairs my whole life. So he's worked in repair management, repairing surgical instruments, and that's kind of how I was introduced into sterile processing. Yeah.
Wow. So this is it's like generational conversation we're going to be having today. I did not know that.
Yeah.
That's really cool. So you grew up on the truck, huh?
Yeah, I did. I was on the truck a lot.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. And then I know if there hasn't been people that have met you in person before, you're going to be present at the 2025 HSPA event. You're going to be speaking during the workshop. So anyone who's registering, great opportunity to see Chase in person, meet him. He's going to be talking about a different topic there. We won't spoil that thunder or anything. But yeah, great insight in general on the industry. And Chase, I'm really excited to be talking to you today about this repair piece, especially now knowing that your exposure to it didn't start when you started in SPD. It started a long time before that.
Long time ago, yeah.
All right. So, I was mentioning to you off air before we got started, this is an interesting season in this year. We're recording this in 2024. We talked about at the beginning of this year, we talked about the people in sterile processing, the roles that make us great. Then we went into the papers that make us awesome. We dug into the paperwork piece, documentation. We talked about the little things that make a big difference last season. And this season, I wanted to take a step back and say, yeah, but there's some big things that have big implications to what we do, what our goals are, what our mission is in sterile processing. Even the tagline for Beyond Clean, we fight dirty. There's some assumptions in that I want to call out. And so this particular interview on this repair question, instrument repair, is a part of that assumption that it's not just about fighting dirty. There's a lot more that goes into what it takes to get our instruments through the cycle and through the process. So maybe just high level, Chase, if you were speaking to a new technician or maybe even like a patient that's about to undergo surgery, how would you describe how this repair question fits into the process and the priority that SPD has to follow?
Yeah, I mean, repair and making sure that our instrumentation is functional is a huge component, right? Like it needs to be clean, it needs to be sterile, but if it's not functioning correctly, I mean, it's useless anyway, right? So it doesn't matter that it's clean or sterile. If it doesn't do its job, then, or could cause harm to the patient, and that's the biggest thing, right? Is, hey, patient safety. I'm talking to a new technician. We're all about patient safety. If this doesn't work right, it could cause patient harm, right? Something falls off because like a scissor breaks off in a patient or something, something crazy happens because you didn't do your job checking the instrument right and setting it out for repair like it should be. That could cause a lot of issues.
I'm hoping on this season to have a whole episode on instrument inspection piece because, that part of the process is a big part of our training in SPD, right? Like if you're in a good department and you got a good training program, you're not being released from training without knowing and understanding that you got to look at these instruments, inspect them not only for cleanness, but also for functionality. And then there's this piece that you just kind of alluded to. Then there's another process that in that inspection process, if you identify a defect, then a whole nother process and a whole nother kind of life cycle of that instrument begins. And that's that repair management piece that we're going to dive into today. But I think it's really important because even though thorough and robust training programs go into the inspection piece oftentimes, I think it's quite common for technicians to have no idea what happens once they put the broken instrument in the broken bin or the defect instrument that we won't even say necessarily broken because I think that has connotations too that we'll talk about here in a second. But you put the instrument there, then it's kind of like that's a magic box, going back to some of those conversations we have with our equipment. But you put it in the magic like broken bin and then magically the next day or the next week, you come back and those instruments are now they're fixed, now they're functional. But how did that happen? Why did that happen? How do you manage the process, especially for department leaders or instrument coordinators that we have out there today that are tuning in? That part of the process is critical. It doesn't happen by itself. It's not magic. Someone has to manage it. And on the SPD side, someone needs to have a pulse on what's going on there because not every repair process is created equal. Not every repair technician is created equal. Not every instrument itself is created equal. And maybe we can also touch on that piece too. But that's the process that we're going to be diving in today. And, hopefully touching on some of that nuance there that the average technician just may assume is happening or why it happens or why it takes so long, etc. So instead of me talking about it, Chase, I want to get you to talk about it. When we identify a broken instrument or a non-functional instrument, that's the phrase that I like a little bit better than broken, on the prep and pack side, like let's say that it's a needle holder that has a crack in the jaw. what happens next and what should happen next?
I mean, if it's a crack in the jaw, like a crack, if it's a cracked instrument that is no longer a usable instrument, it should be thrown away. And then you should be getting like a new needle holder, right? Like that's inventory management kind of goes along with, the repair cycle is like, hey, if there is stuff that's unrepairable, that can be tossed and then order a new one.
You use the word non-repairable. Okay. And that is a very instrument repair industry term, non-repairable. How do we teach our techs what is repairable and what's non-repairable? Do you feel like that's in the average competency or onboarding of our technicians today?
No, it is not.
Okay.
Biggest thing I think is having an in-service, and this is kind of where the conversation, I'm trying to lead it there, is working closely with your repair management company, right? So whoever does your repairs, there's a lot of companies out there that do surgical instrument repairs. Have an in-service with your technician, right? If you're able to get a technician in-house to be like, hey, this is what I'm looking for when I repair stuff. This is stuff that I'm looking for that I say, hey, I can't repair this. And getting those, working closely with your repair company is, I think, the biggest step in repair management for the hospital.
And I guess that goes into some of the nuance around, and even the definition around non-repairable, because there may be some companies and there may be some technicians who say, yeah, can't repair that. But that doesn't mean that nobody could repair it or that no company could repair it. It just means that I can't repair it on the truck potentially, or it may mean that my contract that we have with the hospital says you're not going to pay me to repair this.
Yeah.
So it's a non-repairable in that categories. But, it brings up an important strategic point that whatever company you have, whatever contract you're under, whatever technician is on site, if they're an in-house tech, if you're lucky enough to have a whole repair lab built in your facility, which there's a growing number of facilities out there that have literal on-site repair technicians, which is really cool. Or if you just have the truck that's parked out by the dock or in the back of the hospital, like a lot of us have, or if you're sending the majority of your instruments off to an off-site repair lab somewhere, whatever it is, you got to understand that category, to your point, of the instruments that they can repair, and which ones they could repair, but just not in the truck. And then which ones, to your other point, that there's no hope for this thing. For instance, if you got a blade of a scissor that's completely gone and cracked off, sticking that in the repair bin, probably not going to do anything magic for it. Am I correct there, Chase?
Yeah, 100%. They should not be super gluing anything together.
So, going back to what you were saying, collaborating with your repair technician, with your repair companies, a critical part of this, right? And you started with saying, hey, let's start with an in-service around what to be looking for, and then what the process should be after you find it. And let's kind of pick up there, right? So let's say that we got your in-service. Now we've got these categories. Now our department has these categories of what's repairable, what's non-repairable. Now what does the process look like from there?
So from there, depending on what it is, right, you put it in your repair bin if it can wait. Sometimes there are certain things, again, like talking about how they can repair it in the truck or not. Certain things like scopes or power hand pieces, those do need to be sent to their home base facility, right? They have an in-house workshop with a lot bigger equipment that they can do a lot more with. And sometimes that stuff, especially scopes and power, that is needed a lot quicker than, the Rongier that you found that, might have a squished jaw, right? Or might be a little dull. So, setting those out quicker so you can get them back quicker. That also, for like power, if you're needing loaners, right? Like I don't know about all repair companies, but some repair companies do have certain things that they are able to loan the hospital for a short period of time to kind of help out with that inventory while they're repairing your stuff.
And I guess typically that loaner program, which I think is an important call out, here for some of those critical items that you're always going to need and that you can't really be a drill down, right? You can't be a scope down in order to continue your cases. But I'm assuming a lot of those decisions are made at the contract level. So going back to the strategy piece, just for this department manager or these instrument coordinators out there, you need to be thinking about that as you sit down to sign your annual repair contract of what kind of loaner support are we going to have and do you have available and what's the timeline around that?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. I mean, I don't know who, right, like signs those contracts, right? Like I've never been in the decision of, I know these companies go up for bid, right? They sign a contract for X amount of years. Eventually they'll bid. So you have all the companies trying to get back into the hospital. And so I don't know how that process works. Hopefully, maybe eventually I'll be able to kind of see how that piece plays out. But yeah, working with those contracts and also knowing who your contract is for like scopes and power, because there is companies that sell if you're buying scopes from a certain vendor, those will have a contract time for repair, right? So if you're sending it out, making sure they know, hey, this scope, if you have two separate scopes, like we do at my facility currently, this scope can go out to our company, right? To the repair company, but this other one has to go back to the original manufacturer because it's still under a warranty, right? So all those contracts can get very, very muddy sometimes. And that's a big thing about, talking to supervisor and management about who do we have contracts with, talking to your clinical engineering department, right? Usually they know who the hospital's on contract with, to make sure that you're going through the right channels, because typically if you accidentally send the wrong scope out to your repair company, that voids the warranty. So that's it. If they, for some reason, mess up or whatever happens, the manufacturer can't do anything about it.
Yeah. So that contract piece, going back to that, just being transparent and aware of what your contract says. So if you're not involved in the signing of it or the planning of it, it's like we're all still operating under contracts. So we need to know what the contract says, especially when it comes back to what you were just saying around the nuances piece of, hey, can I get a loaner for this? Is this particular type of inventory, if it's power, is it covered under my third party contract? Is this an OEM contract? There's a lot of complexity in that. That's just not as easy as, okay, well, if there's something breaks, everything is going back to this one company. That may not be the case. And in fact, to your other point, you want to be really sensitive around any existing warranties that you have, because that's money that you're leaving on the table, number one, and you're paying for that you may not have had to pay for otherwise. But then number two, you definitely don't want to unintentionally void warranties just because you weren't aware of those contractual obligations. I think that's an important takeaway in this whole management conversation. Well, let's talk data here, Chase. What types of data points, like should managers or instrument coordinators or even like department supervisors who are managing this process, what do they need to know about the repair process and the data in there to make smart decisions about their inventory?
Yeah. Again, working with your repair company, usually they'll have something that says, depending on the type of set it is, like ortho needs to be done every 6 months, right? These, this type of instrument once a year, these sets. And so making sure that if you have a good tracking system, right, like a lot of the newer tracking systems have a scannable point where you can scan stuff out for repair, right? Or maintenance, right? So your typical maintenance, scanning them out, making sure that you're using that so that, everything is getting rotated correctly, right? And so that's like the biggest thing is knowing, how long should I be waiting to send stuff out? Am I sending stuff out too often? Am I sending it out not often enough? And that's where a good tracking system can help. Currently, we're using an Excel sheet. We're in the process of getting a new tracking system. The tracking system that we have currently does not do any type of maintenance stuff. It's very, very basic system where it literally just has basically just like your count sheet for your sets, and that's about it. That's all it really does. And so, you kind of have to go old school and find something that works. Excel sheets, Google Sheets, can do a lot. They're great at, kind of managing that inventory. Even our repair company actually gave us a list of all the sets that they currently had, from back in like 2020. And we were able to tell them like, hey, this is what's updated. And then they have an auto, population thing. As they type stuff in, it will auto, like, I guess, renew that 6-month period, right? So it'll go back down to 0 and be like, hey, and then turn color of like what needs to be, what's ready, overdue for repair or not.
Yeah. So that data piece, the transparency piece, I think is critical for driving quality of our trays, because a big part of this, and we won't get into it because we covered it in the season in January when we were talking about instrument coordinators, but this proactive approach to instrument repair that is not relying on the OR to tell us something's wrong. We actually, if a broken instrument, our non-functional instrument makes it all the way to the OR, that's great. They can tag it out, and we do want them to do that. And if it breaks in the OR, then obviously we want them to tag it out, communicate that back to us. But the real goal is to not send broken devices to the operator room.
Yeah.
That's the goal.
The doctor sending it back being like, this doesn't work.
Yeah. We don't want that ultimately. Like, if it is broken, we want them sending it back. But that's not where the impetus for the repair program should be. It should be an SPD, should be at that repair technician level. So maybe my question, this is kind of a personal preference maybe, or your kind of personal opinion, but in tracking of those inventories and those trade deadlines or like the priority for repair, like, who do you think should be responsible for that? Is that the responsibility of the repair company that's servicing the account? Is it responsibility of the sterile processing department? Is it a shared responsibility? Kind of talk us through that part of that.
I think it's SPDs personally. As supervisor, we should be able to, like in management, be able to keep track of our inventory and, kind of see where we're sending stuff out, working in conjunction with your repair company, making sure they have updated sets, right? If stuff changes. And then, if you see, because they do have a spreadsheet that they will send us that says like, oh, this stuff is overdue. If you feel like, hey, I put this on my spreadsheet as we recently did it, making sure they know, communicating that with them, being like, hey, I saw that you didn't update your spreadsheet last time, right? Like, if they didn't, sometimes they forget. We're all human, so there's errors on both sides for sure. But I think in the end, like, we as SPD, like, see those sets every single day. I think it's more on SPDs or whoever you're having responsible for sending the stuff out, make sure they, are writing down what they're sending out or scanning it into the tracking system and making sure that all this stuff is, in the right, getting its correct maintenance.
Right. That it's being prioritized.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Because it can be on the spreadsheet, but to your point, it's SPD many times that is the only one that can grab that tray as it's coming through the process, or that can grab it off the shelf. And it depends. I know there's departments that build up a trust level with their repair technician and they've got access to data to the tracking system that kind of some sense becomes hands off and they just let the repair tech do everything. That's kind of why I asked, your personal experience, because I think that does vary from hospital to hospital, but it's an important point of conversation, because if it does vary, that means that you need to talk with your repair technician to make sure that they know what you want to do here and who's doing what in the process and what those expectations are up front, so that, 6 months or 12 months into this repair agreement, you're not like, hey, why haven't you been doing this, repair tech? And they're like, well, because you never told me that you wanted me to do that, right? All right, Chase, got a couple of minutes left here. I want to ask you an interesting question about decision-making for these companies. Obviously, there's multiple companies out there that can support facilities repairing their instruments. This is one of the things that I don't really know any hospital out there that repairs their own instruments. Now, with a little caveat, right? Like these hospitals that have their in-house labs, sometimes they have hired repair technicians from outside to come in, but it's a pretty skilled kind of workforce, right? It's not like if you're a really good sterile processing technician, that automatically means you're going to be a really good repair technician. There's like completely different skill sets involved with that. But in making decisions for what a good repair partner is, what would you say, maybe 2 or 3 of those markers for a great repair technician partner? And then also on the opposite, what are 2 or 3 signs that this team or this technician maybe isn't really meeting the standards that I've set out for them?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing is time, right? So, if you're giving your repair technician 15 sets and, the day that they're there, if they come back at, typically they're, 8 to 5, but if they send stuff out at 8 and, they're bringing 15 sets back at, 12 o'clock, 1, probably means they're not doing 100%, right? They're kind of going through stuff a little bit quicker than they probably should be. So, making sure that, kind of understanding, I guess, the process, I think helps a little of, what it really takes to manage their time correctly, right? Like how much time it should take per set to kind of go through each individual thing. So I think that's a big key one, is making sure they're taking their time with everything. Communication is number 2. Our repair tech, the repair tech can make or break, a lot of stuff, a lot of contracts.
But quite literally, they can also break things too. Make or break the contract. Because if you have, it doesn't matter how good their company is, right, or how their company is structured. If you have a great technician, right, who is there every day or, when he's supposed to be, takes his time, you're never having problems with instruments, everything's always sharp, fantastic, right? At the end of the day, they're stopping by the office, saying, hey, is there anything else you need, right? Is there any other sets I can do while I'm here? Even if you have nothing, right, just the gesture of constant communication is a big thing. And then that third thing, I don't know, I guess making sure, cost, right? Wanting to make sure that they're not overcharging for stuff that probably shouldn't be charged for, right? Kind of seeing their general care of what they consider basic care of your instrument, right? Basic maintenance versus, sometimes it's tiered to where, them throwing it in ultrasonic, costs you money, for whatever reason. So. I think that's a great list, especially that time piece there, Chase, because we deal with that even on the reprocessing side of things. It's it's like the IFU requirements for decontamination. And if you get a tray out of decontam and it only took them 10 minutes back there and you're like, yeah, but I know the IFU said specifically that you need to ultrasonic that for 15 minutes, and somehow you did all the manual cleaning and the 15-minute ultrasonic, and then you got it out of decontam in 10 minutes. It's not adding up.
Yeah,
so exactly. I think that piece is really, really important. Maybe that's a question that you should ask your repair technician up front. like on these average trays, and I know, trays vary. There's more complex ones. If they're running into problems and they're having to make repairs or do replacements, obviously that's going to add time. So this is a moving target. But yeah, to your point, you should probably have a good pulse on what that time window is so that you can hold each other accountable and then make sure that, hey, we're balancing how many trays we're expecting you to do if there's a lot of problems, but then also too that they're not blowing through the trays and not quite giving that level of care that we all want, for the trays and for the process. So Chase, our time has blown past us today, man. I can't believe we're already half an hour in, but I want to give you maybe one more last word. Is there anything else that you, any misconceptions out there that you want to set straight, or is there any kind of call out or shout out that you want to give to repair technicians or to sterile processing folks that are interfacing with these repair techs every day? Obviously, this is a team dynamic. We have to have each other to survive, but I want to give you the last word here before we wrap.
The repair technicians, right? If you have a great one, they're awesome, right? They can be, again, make or break everything. And so making sure that, again, the communication with your technician and asking them, again, up front, what is everything you can do for us, right? Like what, again, loaner systems, right? Your tracking, right? Seeing how much they can do on their side and then working, kind of with that, I think is a big, having them work for you, right? So.
I love that. Well, and you referenced in one of your previous answers too that these techs are human, and I think that's important. Like no matter what the contract says, we got to keep in mind that humans make mistakes, and a mistake is part of the process as long as there's a process that can catch the mistakes and that you're working together to improve the process to reduce those mistakes together. And you can build a really powerful partnership, to your point, if that communication is there, that trust is there as well. So great insight all the way around, Chase. We're going to have your contact information in the show notes of this episode. And like I mentioned before, if you're listening to this in the fall of 2024 or early on in 2025, don't forget to go check Chase out at the 2025 HSPA event. He'll be speaking at the workshop there just prior to the kickoff of the main conference. But yeah, Chase, thank you for your time today. Thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
All right. And that was Chase Elms. You've been listening to Beyond Clean, the primary podcast on the Beyond Clean network. This is CE approved, so make sure to go check and click on the CE quiz to get your CEs for tuning into this show. And hey, if you haven't gone out to the truck recently, go say hi to your repair tech and tell them, hey, I just listened to this podcast episode, got me thinking about some things, want to ask some questions. I promise you they'll appreciate it. Maybe give them a little heads up if they want to clean up the truck before you just surprise them out there, but let them know that you're coming. And like we say each and every week here at Beyond Clean, until we talk to you again next week, keep fighting dirty.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Beyond Clean. As a reminder, you can help support us by subscribing to Beyond Clean on your favorite podcast app or by downloading the smartphone app on iPhone or Android. Simply search for Beyond Clean in the App Store or Google Play. The best thing about downloading the smartphone app is that you can access bonus content for certain episodes and view episodes in certain categories, like articles on the go and vendor spotlights. Are you following us on LinkedIn or Facebook yet? If you are and you love an episode or post, then let your social network know about it. Like, comment, or share our posts along with your thoughts and keep the conversation going. If you have any topics or guests that you would like to recommend for a future episode, just send us an email to info@beyondclean.net. We look forward to hearing from you.